you to everyone for coming. This is the Community Impact and Innovation webinar. So a few kind of housekeeping announcements to start with. Solidarity Engineering hit 5 years actually November, and we've come such a long way from 2020. So I'm just really proud of our team and our impact. Yeah, we've touched like tens of thousands of people's lives. So yeah. Also, our Joy in Motion fundraiser is going super well. We hit $23,300. Our goal is $40,000. So don't stop giving. We have a match up to $16,500. So if you give $50, it's actually $100. So keep that in mind. And we have a few of our matches actually at this meeting tonight. So just huge thank you to our matches. You are just like really inspiring others to give. So that's really important. I also want to plug the Choose Love shop. Choose Love is one of our granting foundations, and they do amazing work. They have, we're one of the nonprofits that they support, but they support other nonprofits. And if you go to the Choose Love shop, you can, it's like a holiday shop that you can buy specific things for nonprofits. Next item on the agenda is the Solidarity Engineering board member opening. Starting after the holidays, I'm going to be actively looking for a new board member for Solidarity. So if anyone on this call is interested in joining Solidarity's board, or if you know anyone who might be a good fit for us, reach out, let me know. Are you guys, is this in your way? Yeah, this is, okay. So yeah, so this board opening, I kind of want it focused on someone who might be more interested in helping with the finance side of things. So if you know any accountants or anyone interested in math, but it doesn't have to be. It can be anyone who's kind of like on our same wavelength, who is also open to helping with the with like a position as a treasurer. So next is the Solidarity Engineering practicum and volunteer opportunities. We are opening, right now we're open with summer practicum, intern, and co-op students for remote or in-person positions. So if anyone's interested in that. And then lastly, we'll be doing a 2025 yearly impact report coming out in like January, maybe February. And that'll have like the hard numbers for like how many liters of water we distributed this year, how many hygiene kits, like exact numbers, how many people we helped. So that'll be great. And then our kind of non-updates, you know, we're on kind of a tight schedule for tonight. So I can't get into all of our project updates. And, you know, we have made like amazing progress in all of our work, but our ongoing stuff related to our water, sanitation, hygiene initiatives, infrastructure work, and playground work is continuing at all of our sites in Reynosa, Tapachula, Jordan, and Ukraine. And you can kind of see this is the closest that we're going to get to like a full team photo. And we've got Jose, Havakuk, Pepe in the back, and then we've got Lara, Caroline, Miranda, and Ifa in the front here. And speaking of practicum students, I mean, literally half of this team had been practicum students at one time, and now they're part of our team. So yeah, so the practicum is absolutely like a pathway to staying with Solidarity a little bit more long-term. And then also these other photos are literally from this afternoon. We had a holiday party at Colegio La Cruz, which is one of the sites in Reynosa that we work. And here are the kids doing gingerbread houses, and we had a piñata and a pizza party. and other like holiday activities. Okay, so I want to get into, I just want to highlight like 3 of our projects before we get to our amazing speakers. And all of our projects are doing really well. So these are just like ones that recently have really been impactful. So the first one that I want to highlight is the Women's Health Program in Reynosa. This is like popping off right now, and it's absolutely due to our new community health promoter, Carolee, right here. Carolee teaches workshops and sessions. Down here, she's teaching a changing bodies and personal hygiene class to some of the girls at the Colegio La Cruz school. She does distribution. So this main photo, she's distributing hygiene kits after she did an educational workshop at one of our clinic partners sites. And then also in this other corner, she was at the maternal hospital in Reynosa distributing newborn and maternity kits. So this hospital serves low-income and immigrant families. So that was amazing. The next project that I just want to highlight is at the Colegio La Cruz school in Reynosa. For those that have been following us super closely, just to give you a quick wrap of what we've done at this school. It's a really small school. They've got like 60 kids, and it's like these 3 buildings. Since this summer, we started working here in the summer. We built them a bathroom with a septic tank. We built them a paved and covered courtyard, a playground. We got their water, and we actually just recently got some tanks and are finalizing the storage and distribution system there. We provide them with hygiene supplies. We provide them with school supplies. We provided their teachers with laptops. We are currently working on the design of a solar system there, a solar electrical system that hopefully will get to start construction on that maybe in like February. So yeah, and the big update here is that we have finally restarted our weekly / bi-weekly STEM classes. So we have a bunch of science, technology, engineering, and math classes that we've been going and teaching to the kids there. And this is Jose in this one picture, and this is Pepe, and this is like definitely one of their favorite projects that they get to do with the kids. And then lastly, we've got the Women and Girls Comprehensive Center at the Zatari camp in Jordan. And this project is improving the bathroom facilities there for the patients. This clinic, this is a comprehensive center. It's like a health clinic. They see a lot of pregnant women, and these bathroom facilities, first of all, they didn't have any seated toilets. They didn't have any sinks to wash hands, no soap, no lights. They were not handicap accessible. There's like a slew of improvements that we're doing, and we just started working on that this week. So now that I've kind of gone through these quick project updates, we have a lot more project updates, but you know, if any of you guys have questions about anything else, I can like reach out to me. I'm happy to brag about all of the work that we're doing. But first, before I wanted to pass it off to our amazing speakers. And first up, we have Dr. Bertha Bermudez Tapia. Bertha is an assistant professor of sociology at New Mexico State University who studies migration and asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border. From 2019 to 2023, she spent extensive time at the Matamoros migrant camp. And through her collaboration with Solidarity Engineering, Bertha has worked to ensure that academic research serves the communities it studies, translating complex policy impacts into accessible knowledge and amplifying the voices of those directly affected by border enforcement. Her approach reflects a commitment to public sociology, research that doesn't just study social problems from a distance, but actively contributes to understanding and addressing them alongside the people and organizations working on the ground. She's currently working to complete a book on migrant camps at the border. I've already read one chapter of this book and it's amazing. And solidarity engineering is highlighted in it. So I will pass it off to Bertha. Yeah, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. Erin and I met when I was still a graduate student. So even though I think it's been 5 years since we met the first time, it's kind of, yeah, sometimes I don't believe my doctor yet. It's like, it's weird, but it's true. So, and I want to start with a place. So there is this levee in Matamoros called El Bordo. When I was a kid, actually, my grandfather will take me there every day after school to fly kites. My grandma used to work at elementary school right up in front of the border and this levee. And while she was still teaching, we needed to buy some time. So my grandpa always took me there. And we spent all afternoon, he teaching me how to balance the frame, how to feel when the wind was right, how to launch it. It was a magical place for me, to be honest. It was pure of joy and possibility. But let's fast forward 30 years from that, and that same levee, El Bordo, became home to one of the largest migrant camps on the US-Mexico border. The place where I flew kites became the place where thousands of people lived in tents, waiting for asylum seekers that kept getting footed away. Where, for example, I met Sylvia, whose daughter was tempted to be kidnapped, where families struggled just to find clean water. And that's where I met you all, Solidarity Engineering. You were already there doing the work, building infrastructure, mapping the camps with drones, figuring out sanitation systems. And I was actually trying to figure it out what my role as a researcher even was. And I'm saying that because here's the thing. I started my dissertation project thinking to do something that it was very traditional, a very traditional ethnography, observe, document, analyze, stay objective, think of what you had to do. But then I met Sylvia, but I also met Manuel, who needed to send her daughter across the border alone. I met Kenya, who was pregnant and desperate about having her baby in those conditions, living in that camp. And asking them questions about my research, I kept thinking, well, what the hell am I doing here? And how I'm actually going to help? Because doing just my research is not going to change this. So that's when everything shifted for me. And honestly, you were Solidarity already modeling what I was trying to figure it out. You weren't just helping migrants. You were working with people, centering their experiences about what they needed. And I think you show me and I show you, and we all engage into something that really grew and that today I really treasure. And let me tell you a little bit on the patterns that I found and how working with Solidarity Engineering helped me to see them. So first, I named something that it's called well, I didn't name it, but I use this metaphor of the cycle of violence. And in this fifth pattern, violence at the border operates in this really indicious cycle, and you all live every stage of it. So it's going to start with a policy, and it's going to be this migrant protection protocols who's going to force people into dangerous Mexican cities. And this is a stage one. Policy triggers violence. Then people are going to respond. And this is when Solidarity Engineering and all these other incredible organizations came in. And also asylum seekers started, building ovens, First, they didn't have any place to cook, any place. They were relying only on the food that other organizations like Team Brownsville were bringing to them. And they were like, no, we want to be more active. And they started building their own kitchens, organizing security, creating schools. And what was very important was not only that asylum seekers were actually building, but how they came together with these people who bring the technical expertise they needed to succeed. For example, this drone mapping to understand the space, to engineer sanitation so people wouldn't get sick, data systems that NGOs could coordinate. Then we're going to have another stage that is going to be survival strategies. But here's the paradox, and I think we both together grapple with. The better those strategies work, the better asylum seekers get into trying to figure it out ways to live better in this camp, the more liable the camp became. And then when the more liable the camp became, the less visible the crisis became to the people outside. And that was a big problem. You remember that playground, that beautiful playground that you helped to build. Kids needed that desperately. But also what it means is that if somebody from the outside look at that it's wonderful, that is beautiful, or like the soccer field, they will feel that there's not such violence and that there's some sort of normalization. And that is going to create some sort of invisibility, not from the people who's suffering or from us who are working there, but from the government who can't ignore the crisis. And the US government and the Mexican government definitely will, because it wasn't, well, for the US, it wasn't US soil. And for the Mexican government, they basically put people behind a fence and just turn their backs. But your sophisticated response, the engineering, the coordination, it actually help to manage what these policies continue to do. And that is very, very valuable. Another stage that I want to highlight is when the Matamoros camp closed for the first time, the violence didn't end. It moved to Reynosa. And what you did, you moved with that. And that was a crisis for everybody, because Reynosa is 45 minutes away from Matamoros. You were all settled already. You have a place that you recognize, that you know how to navigate, and then just suddenly feel and move into a different city with very different rules. I was born in Matamoros. I have family in Reynosa, but still for me, Reynosa was very foreign, and I cannot. It's hard to understand what that matters for you, and you had to move from Brownsville to McAllen, and then get to meet other people to help, and that was fascinating. Like the resilience, not only from the asylum seekers, but also from all these very powerful organizations that most of them, like Solidarity Engineered, were created right there on that levee. There is another pattern, not just this kind of like paradox on help and normalization, but also there is this pattern that I call the ratchet effect. And you witness this progression. So think about ratchet straps. They only go in one direction, tighter, tighter, tighter. And that's asylum policy. That's what is happening to asylum policy. Metering start kind of 2016, then it gets worse with the Trump administration in 2018, kind of become permanent. Then MPP in 2019, that's when you really had to mobilize. Government forces over 70,000 people to wait in Matamoros and other cities in Tamaulipas and the Mexican border. Civil society has to fill the gap. Then Title 42, and that's when over 2 million people were expelled, not even with the hope that they may be accepted in the United States at some point. And here's the perverse part. By then, some advocates were like, well, at least MPP gave people coordinates, as I was just saying. And the thing is, MPP was not better than Title 42, and it was not better what's happening now. But because each policy is getting worse, we kind of like, oh man, I miss when MPP was a thing, because at least there was a path for these folks to get asylum on horrible conditions, but there was a path. And this is the problem. Each restriction resets what we accept as normal. And now in 2025, asylum is mostly dead. And that's where the ratchet was always heading. You all felt this. Each policy made you work harder, while resources stayed the same or even got worse. And this is basically what in my book I call devolution by design. And this isn't a system failing, it's working exactly as designed. Asylum is being systematically taken apart through predictable patterns. The suffering is in a side effect, is the point. The cruelty is deterrent. And here's what your work revealed. The sophistication of solidarity engineering's response show how badly government has abandoned its responsibility. You needed engineers, ground technology, data coordination for a camp. That gap between what you have built and what government should help provide, that devolution made visible. You made the invisible visible. Literally, all your work is also political. Your work document the failure while providing care. That's what I mean by engaged research, the research that I learned to do in this camp. That's what collaboration between academic work and humanitarian work should look like. And let me be a little bit as specific on what working together contribute. For the people in the camps, your infrastructure saved lives. The sanitation system prevented disease outbreaks. There was not a huge crisis, for example, during the COVID pandemic. The drone mapping helped coordinate services. All the data systems you created meant people to got what they actually needed. So for my research, you opened doors I couldn't have opened. Your relationships, your trust with people, your technical understanding of the challenges, I will have missed that. And you opened me the doors to that. We created knowledge together that neither of us could have produced alone, I believe. Your documentations become part of my ethnographic record, and my analysis, I believe, helped to explain some of the patterns you were experiencing and how to navigate those. But here's what's most valuable for me. And that is that you held this impossible tension. You were meeting immediate needs, building, problem solving, keeping people alive, while also documenting failures, questioning why any of this was necessary, pushing for structural change. You show me that humanitarian response and political critique aren't opposites. They have to go together. You told me that infrastructure is political, where you put bathrooms effects who save from assault, for example. We didn't have that in the Matamoros camp, and there were a lot of cases of assaults in the bathrooms. And then when we moved to Reynosa, that was the first thing you were thinking about. So these aren't neutral technical decisions. These are political choices about whose dignity matters. And you model what real collaboration looks. Not we are the experts that will fix you, but working with you asylum seekers, learning for you, building based on your experiences about your own lives. That's solidarity. That's what your name means. And that's why my research approach became, because of working with you. So where does this leave us? The cycle will continue. The work with Solidarity Engineer does it more need than ever, and we have seen this by their expansion. But humanitarian response, however vital, can't fix structural violence. We can keep people alive, and we must, but survival is injustice. We have to interrupt these cycles. We have to address the policies, not just the symptoms. What gives me hope right now is what I saw in your work, the way you combine care and critique, the way you refuse to accept camps as normal while making them more liable. The playground you helped build is still there in El Bordo, rusted and abandoned, but I was just there and it's there. It's a monument of resilience, people building for their kids, even in impossible circumstances. But it is also an indictment. Children shouldn't live in camps. And I think that's the beauty of what you're doing right now with this new playground in Reynosa. It's no longer a camp, it's for a community. My grandfather taught me that kites fly because of tension, the pull between what could be. Solidarity engineering work holds that tension, meeting needs today while demanding structural change tomorrow. So providing cares while refusing to accept the conditions. That's what gives me the hope that different futures are still possible. The kites are gone from El Bordo, those kites that I built with my grandpa when I was a child. But the wind still blows, the playground still stands, and people refuse to give up. So thank you for the collaboration. Thank you for the work. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to the people who follow you.
Bertha, yes, I love it. I have so many comments, but we have to move on. But yeah, we'll have time for questions and comments after. So that was amazing. Cas, you've got to follow that. I don't know how. So Cas Holman is our next speaker. She's a renowned toy designer, author, and play advocate whose innovative work transforms play into a tool for child development and community resilience. She recently authored Playful, exploring how play fosters creativity and emotional growth in children facing adversity. A longtime partner of Solidarity Engineering, Cas is designing a vibrant new park outside the Senda de Vida 1 shelter in Reynosa, which we're calling Parque Tim, which is currently under construction and which will provide local and displaced families with a safe space for joy and connection. So I'll pass it off to Cas.
Thank you, Erin, and Bertha, thank you. That was beautiful and such a wonderful omen to the work that Solidarity does. I became involved with the Solidarity Engineering team, I think somewhere around 4 years ago. I have a fair amount of experience kind of designing pop-up playgrounds, or just kind of working with ad hoc materials that are readily available in order to facilitate open-ended free play and playful learning with children. So initially, we were talking about some pop-up play. And through learning more about the camps and about both Senda 1 and Senda 2 was kind of under construction and being, I guess, initially kind of built, and learning more about the conditions and the work that they did, I started to wonder if, in fact, pop-up or temporary was the right solution. I was starting to understand, get a better picture of kind of how long-term the needs were and how long children were there and how long these communities were in the places that they were. And so initially I have a material that's called Rigamajig that's like kind of ready to go pop-up playground. So we sent a kit down to Reynosa, and I followed soon after to kind of observe and see what else was going on and how we could help them kind of, just like I said, use readily available materials, scrap and pallets or tires or whatever was around to facilitate play. And also we were thinking about learning. There had been a conversation about what might school look like. And I was interested in helping kind of think outside of the school archetype, in part because resource-wise to build a whole new building felt like it was maybe not necessary, and we could provide learning without providing a school. And in particular, school comes with quite a bit of other baggage and things that gets hard to provide, as well as may not actually be the type of learning that these children actually need at that stage. So I was also really interested in having more conversations about how play can be used as a tool for resilience, not just for the children, but for the entire community. So when I went down and met Pastor Hector and saw the camps and worked, we kind of developed something that we were calling con cualquier cosa, which meant like with whatever's around. So talking to some of the community leaders at that stage. And what I noticed was how enthusiastic they all were, how many people wanted to be involved, whether it was the person who was kind of managing the tool shed. He was really enthusiastic about cutting out some new shapes of things for kids to play with. And he didn't have a child. He was wasn't a father or a parent per se. And some other people who got involved just for the sake of, being part of something or kind of being generative. And also it started to become really clear that play, just the adjacency of play, was something that would benefit everyone, regardless of whether or not they had a child. And I know that to be true from my work and from a lot of research, in particular research that I did that relates to my book. But the kind of science behind both neuroscience and of course sociology and psychology that show us the value and benefit of even adjacency of play, even if you're not playing, like what it can do for your nervous system and your psyche to just even hear play, to hear a playground, whether or not you have a direct relationship to it, has a benefit. And then of course, better yet, if you even as an adult have opportunities to play or be playful in some way in your life. So that kind of started expanding what we were thinking about. And again, Bertha, like you said, that even like design is political, right? Where is the playground go? And how can it be something that benefits everyone, not just people with children or families? And so that kind of carried over into the Parque Tim, or the Senda 1 playground, in part because play is a place where people can come together and kind of understand each other and see each other in ways that they may not have other opportunities to. It's whether it's the adults who might be walking through the playground. It's not just a playground, but also a park. The trees and the nature that we're integrating into the design is really important. And I think that'll be like phase 3, maybe, in our fundraising. But that people know that it's a place that they can come and again, be around play, even if they're not directly playing. And I would say that as adults, just walking around a park is a form of play, chatting with strangers or meeting their neighbors, or, maybe playing with some children that are there. But primarily that the children from the community and from the camp are playing together. And that's going to build bonds for the entire, for families, on both sides of the camp wall. And so, yeah, that's been a really interesting and kind of long process of thinking through numerous different kind of goals, both for the communities and for, sorry, my dog is suddenly being very, we just hit dinner time. So, yeah, and again, using materials that are readily available. So designing it so that it can be repaired and maintained and even kind of, renovated if need be, by people who are there. So there's no custom special hardware, nothing that can't be kind of ad hoc, like we have these big cargo nets that are made out of standard rope. The nuts and bolts are things that are readily available at hardware stores. And so making sure that it's maintainable by the people that whoever may be there in a few years. Not that it'll need any maintenance, of course, it's going to last forever, but Jose and Pepe have, I hope, been having a lot of fun kind of figuring it out and playing with it. But it is also with the I mentioned that there's quite a bit of plantings that are designed into trees and kind of pathways and things that will happen, as well as the design. Really, we kind of allowed for mostly large gross motor skill play. What was really clear in the camps was that kids needed somewhere to like run and yell and jump, and from watching the playground at Senda 2 and learning from and observing what was kind of popular and what happened there with the quantity of kids, we also wanted to kind of give some different, spread out some of the features, the really fun, exciting features. And give them things that, like I said, like that we know physiologically help with stress. And so a number of things, lots of swinging, lots of climbing and jumping, and kind of open-ended sorts of ways to climb and maneuver their ways around, as well as some areas for teenagers that allow for a little more kind of performance and gathering. And there is a mud kitchen for toddlers, and the kind of under fives to play with mud and pretend play with a mud kitchen, if you're familiar. And then a lot of rope courses, so physical challenges that also become kind of because there's so much space. We had a lot of fun making different kind of routes. There's kind of a path of play that can happen throughout that is really carefully does not too disruptive of the walking path, because we do want the neighborhood and the walkers to be present, where the adults, I think that the adjacency of adults and the presence of adults who want to come and be in there will help maintain the space. So making it an attractive place for other people who will be invested and really good stewards of it in the long term. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to add.
Well, thank you so much, Cas. And honestly, like, we already, even though we built a fence around this, and it's a construction site right now, but it's going to be a playground, there's already kids that come.
Oh, good.
Yeah, at night. And we're deciding right now if we want to put the swings up and just like let them use it, or if we need to treat it like it's a proper construction site and try harder to keep everyone out. But
yeah, I think the fact that it looks like an in-process construction site is part of what's making it appealing for them. Even if there was no rumors of a playground coming, I think the fact that it looks like a construction site is going to make it an even better playground than if it looked like a playground.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So I have so many additional questions and comments, but I'm going to jump to our next speaker. And if you guys have questions, just hold them till the end, and then we can go through everyone. So our next speaker is our very own Lara Barbarawi. Lara is a dedicated community organizer and advocate for the liberation, rights, and dignity of oppressed communities, blending her expertise in biomedical engineering, health sciences, and global health. She's very well-rounded, with a justice-focused approach. So as Solidarity Engineering's very own project coordinator in Jordan, she drives impactful programs supporting displaced populations and amid complex humanitarian challenges. So I'm going to pass it off to Lara. So take it away.
Thank you. It's going to be a bit difficult living up to Bertha and Cas, but I'll try my best. Now, the next few moments or minutes are going to be quite heavy on the information. So hopefully you guys are able to, stick along. But I'll start by sharing a few analyses on the humanitarian landscape and the current world order, specifically from an American-centric perspective, because currently we do live in the American imperialist age, and America is a huge actor in the current world order, and it's really important to analyze the networks that it operates in. And so when you hear humanitarian and humanitarian aid and then America, you automatically think of USAID. Now, different people call it like USAID. I'm going to call it USAID for simplicity, but it's one of the first topics that I'll discuss. And it has dominated the humanitarian and development fields for years and years. And it is one of the biggest donors in the world, if not, or was one of the biggest donors in the world, if not the biggest. And as we all know, USAID has been recently suspended by the Trump administration in a power play or in a practice of necropolitics, which is basically deciding who lives and who dies. And it is said about 95 million people would lose access to basic health care, and it will lead to about 3 million preventable deaths yearly, which is absolutely horrendous. And it was suspended because it was run by, and I quote, radical left lunatics, and that it has not, quote, aligned with American interests, and in many cases, antithetical to American values, which is really hypocritical and funny because, you know, if you consider the origins of USAID and the USAID, US military complex, you'll be really like confused, right? Now, USAID was actually launched in the 60s by the President John F. Kennedy as a tool or a soft weapon, or they call it soft power, of population-centric counterinsurgency. Now, that's a big word, but we'll break it down together. For those who are not familiar, insurgency is like an organized movement by a group of people who are aiming to overthrow, challenge, or undermine established government or authority. And it's usually through irregular or guerrilla tactics rather than open conventional warfare. And then counterinsurgency means that they're trying to counter or contain that insurgency. So it's a mix of military, political, economic, psychological, and civic actions taken by a government or an authority to defeat or contain an insurgency or a movement. So they found that counterinsurgency by elimination, which would be assassinating movement leaders, not to be effective or successful, because what these movements had was the popular support and the masses. And when the leaders would be assassinated or quote unquote eliminated, they would just be replaced from that popular mass. And so what they needed to do is shift their target to the mass, the popular mass that is producing these insurgents. So what USAID began to do is provide topical aid to the masses, give them just enough medicine for the masses to survive, to skew the image of the crimes of the US military that was, and the wars, crimes that they were committing against their people. And so this partnership between USAID and the US military dates back all the way to the Vietnam War. They had jointly launched the Civil Operations Revolutionary Development Support, the CORDS program, which is a civil and military initiative aimed at countering insurgencies. Now, they sought to juxtapose the US as a peace and nation building party with movements or insurgencies as violent and chaos-seeking parties. And so obviously, in theory, it would work. Now, while this failed in Vietnam, it succeeded really well in Iraq. And there were similar efforts in Cuba, Bolivia, Peru, Afghanistan, and other countries aimed at destabilizing governments and influencing the people towards US interests. And I'm going to read a quote by a US commander who was involved in the war crimes in Iraq or Iraq. And I quote, "By providing essential services and local governance, USAID reduced the governance gap that insurgents exploited. As citizens begin to see even slight improvements in governance and economic activity, they became less receptive to insurgent or movement narratives. That in turn indirectly contributed to our successful military mission accomplishments." And now if you continue to read articles written by US officials about USAID and the US military partnership, you'll see that the goal of the partnership was to progress American interests and national security concerns. And so to say that USAID is foreign aid isn't really correct. It's more of foreign policies. And not to mention, USAID loans and grants were often conditional on the adoption of American agenda items or interests. And now this is not to discredit, obviously, the improvements or the positive improvements that can be attributed to USAID, but it's also, and it's also important to acknowledge that many of the workers are well-intended, but may be oblivious to the politics and the aim of that organization. All of this to say is that it's quite hypocritical to say that USAID does not serve American interests and it's run by radical left lunatics. But they suspended USAID anyway, which begs the question, what does this mean? Like, are they no longer using USAID or soft power or population-centric counterinsurgency anymore? What is the alternative tactic? And while this is a really hefty question, I'm quite frankly not as equipped to answer, it's a good departure point. And kind of to move on to the next analysis, which is the current world order and by proxy, humanitarianism as a whole. And it's really important to include the UN in this analysis and how its foundations are completely crumbling. Now, for those who are tuned in, we've all seen Israel's and America's complete disregard to international law, human rights, and any democratic governance that the US sought to establish. The UN sought to establish. Now, Israel is not only backed by the US, but in an active partnership with the US, has shook our complete understanding of human rights being universal and international law being upheld. And with its impunity and constant violations, it has kind of also undermined international humanitarian law. Hundreds of humanitarian workers have been killed, hospitals bombed, medical personnel killed, and there's a complete disregard to international humanitarian law by Israel and America. And human rights defenders like Francesca Albanese has been completely sanctioned by the US. And you have international criminal court judges also being sanctioned by the US for issuing a warrant arrest for Israeli officials for genocide and other war crimes. And these professionals are being blacklisted alongside terrorists for upkeeping world order and justice and some human dignity. And then the US is also defunding the UN because of its work, or partly because of its work for the Palestinian people, which was deemed as anti-Semitic. But beyond all of that, you have the wealth gap that is the worst it has been in modern history. You have ICE agents tearing down communities and families in the name of protecting borders. You have surveillance at an all-time high, with AI being one of the most uncertain or potentially the most dangerous weapon of our future. Now, what does this all mean? It means many things, but I'll only have time for 3. A, humanitarian aid being weaponized by governments to progress agendas as opposed to provide relief. B, human rights and international law, including international humanitarian law, as frameworks are completely undermined and have proven insufficient to prevent mass atrocities and to bring about relief and justice. And this also signifies a new world order, with fascism being the compass of the ruling elite and the governments. Now, I'm not here to fearmonger at all, and I hope I'm not fearmongering, but this is where we really need to step up as communities, as grassroots, to prevent this turning point from actualizing to its full potential, right? So beyond the political education that you can take up, or attending protests or raising awareness, I want to highlight something that is oftentimes overlooked, which is to build and sustain change, we need to have stronger community ties and networks. To analyze individuals as the basic unit of society is to do a disservice to understanding society. Society is made of relationships, and we have to build from the bottom upwards. We have to build stronger relationships among yourselves, with your neighbors, with your communities, and you'd be amazed at what you can achieve as a community in terms of change, in terms of stability, in terms of economic resilience. And one example I'd love to highlight is, and I hope I don't butcher this, but it's a union called Union del Barrio, which is an organization that defends Mexican and Latin American communities, especially from ICE raids. And I really encourage everyone to look into them. And they've kind of established this community structure to prevent ICE raids, and just protect the communities. And that's because they were able to establish those community networks. And on the notes of grassroots, The defunding of USAID and the UN has also shown how critical grassroots and unconditional funding is. It prioritizes the needs of communities on the ground above foreign interests. So no foul play, it's just pure building trust and building systems that last. It also breaks dependencies on unreliable politics. It doesn't depend on who's in office and how they feel about a particular issue. And it also breaks away from what is seen as trendy and popular in the humanitarian world. And it focuses on long-term resilience and efforts building. Which brings us to the Jordan Project. Now, Jordan has been one of the world's largest hosts for refugees, hosting from Syria, Palestine, Iraq, Sudan, Somalia, from Yemen, and has received lots of funding from the USAID and the UN, as we've discussed. The UN, but they've been suspended, as we've discussed, and now essential services that were previously being provided have either been stopped or completely reduced, and has left the refugee and vulnerable populations even more vulnerable with their needs not being met. Now, this is a pattern that is not a new phenomena with the cutting of US aid. We've seen this happen constantly in the humanitarian world. We've seen humanitarian aid flooding crises and just having this surge of humanitarian aid, like, for example, Haiti post-earthquake in 2010, and it created this huge industry dependency and these new systems that were separate or isolated from local systems. And it didn't strengthen local systems and structures, and then the aid pulled out and systems began collapsing. And so in in the realm of humanitarianism, it is extremely important to strengthen and make sustainable local systems and institutions, rather than creating systems and processes that create dependencies. And although it is much easier said than done, Solidarity is attempting to put this into practice. To speak on the Jordan Project, and I know it's kind of the same practice in Mexico and Ukraine, but this looks like working with local partners and building community relations and trust. Now, I know this has been quite a few things, and I hope I didn't move too fast on certain points. But something that I'd really like to emphasize is that we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And the change starts with us and the grassroots, and never be discouraged at how large or how small an issue is, because we will always be greater than the sum of our individual parts. And no problem is too big to tackle. But I think I'll end it here because I don't want to go for too long, but I'll welcome any follow-up questions or any points you'd like me to expand on.
Thanks so much, Lara. That was so educational. Yeah, I mean, we had talked about like the history of USAID and everything, but I was so surprised when I learned about all of that. So really interesting. Yeah, super fascinating. So we've got 5 minutes left, so I want to open it up to questions to our amazing speakers. Does anyone have a question right off the bat? If no one has anything, I can start with Bertha, actually. You're like, I guess maybe this is more like a comment than a question. Making when I was there with you and, making these living conditions better at these camps and these shelters, it's really interesting how it makes it almost more acceptable for like the outside world when they are looking in. And so is there one thing in particular that you noticed that like, oh, if we fixed the bathrooms or if we fixed the flooding issues, like that, there was less interest from news media or the public? This is a question for Bertha.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, I think my argument is not that the media is not going to pay attention because of a particular aspect that you fix, but the problem is the media is going to be interested if there is something they can make a big thing of. So if people are not, and this is going to sound horrible, but I think it's true and it happened, if people are not dying there, then there is not that much of an interest in what's happening. So by us stopping the crisis to become fatal, then there was not that much of this big attention. So it has to be tragedy there for those eyes to come and see. And I think that's a big problem. And it's not a problem of the organizations that are working there. It's a problem of who we are and who we become as a society. And it's also the problem of both governments, the Mexican government, who continuously denied the existence of this camp for years, but also the US government saying like, everything's fine, nothing's happening. And this goes beyond administrations, because when we switch from Trump administration to Biden administration, yes, Biden says, let's end MPP, but then let's keep Title 42, and everything just went to Reynosa. And the problem will become worse because the situation in Reynosa was way horrible than what we experienced in Matamoros. And again, is this discourse of the normalization of violence, because what was happening in Matamoros was already awful, but Reynosa was way worse. It was Matamoros on steroids the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. All right. Anyone have any other questions for our three amazing